I know Stephen King is typically known for his horror stories, but The Dark Tower is not really a horror story. Unless, of course, you consider the fact it was released by Sony Pictures, who, aside from the occasional hit and Spider-Man, has been slowly dying a horrible, gruesome death. Sequels nobody wanted. God-awful remakes. And what the video game adaptations? I'm sorry, it's a little hard to watch. Like most of their films. Let me share a little horror story with you that King didn't write. It's a story about a series of 8 books written by a prolific writer, a writer who lends himself towards cinematic adaptations. And that series of 8 novels could have lent itself to the start of something huge that almost every studio is thirsty for today. This film could have been the start. It could have unlocked the door to a cinematic universe, because the coolest thing about the Dark Tower series of books is it actually links all of Stephen King's iconic stories. It's the linchpin to the Stephen King universe. Notice there were a few times I said could have. Yeah, this film could have been a lot of things. It could have been directed by J.J. Abrams, true story. It could have been directed by Ron Howard, but he chose to produce. So instead we got relatively unknown Danish filmmaker Nikolaj Arcel, who is well respected in his homeland, but he inherited this Hollywood mess as his Hollywood debut. And it may surprise you that in a King-based movie, that this whole mess starts with the writing. Okay, maybe it's not a huge surprise if you grew up in the same era that I did. The era of Thinner, The Mangler, Needful Things, and Sleepwalkers. A series of bad, but yeah, kind of entertaining films in the early to mid-90s. But this specific reference has to do with Akiva Goldsman. Now granted, he is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter, but since winning his Oscar, he's been basically a cancer in the filmmaking world, bringing us stinkers like Winter's Tale, The Fifth Wave, Rings, and my personal worst film of this year, the latest Transformers. Even when he gets lucky with shows like Fringe, it's usually co-written by about a dozen other people. As a former writer and now English teacher, much like the President of the United States, I have the best words, and I'm going to give you a few selective, juicy words when it comes to Goldsman's writing. Lazy, going through the motions, uninspired. Alright, not the greatest words, but it gets the point across. This man had a series of 8 books to work with, and it seemed like he didn't even try. And what's worse is that effort actually reflects on the director as well. 8 books and we get a 90-minute movie. And that is after extensive reshoots to add more footage and more backstory to the film. The director's like a reverse Peter Jackson. Even having read some of the books as a teenager, I found myself confused with the narrative. There were definitely parts that they left out. There were parts that they probably should have put in to make the narrative clearer. And in fact, even the timeline seemed misleading. And let's just say, if Goldsman phoned it in, the studio probably got a group rate on the phone bill. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the other man who phoned it in was actually the man who made me the most interested in the film in the first place, the one who drew me in, the typically awesome Idris Elba. And yet, with this character, he just went through the motions, much like the screenwriter did. And quite frankly, with what he was given, I can't blame him. Elba's gunslinger was a joyless version of what I remember from the books. Now granted, he carried off the jaded warrior part of the character. Perhaps that was all he got out of the script, but more importantly, there are a lot of fun fish-out-of-water moments when he comes to our world that I felt they touched upon just slightly in the film, but really could have used more of. It would have really humanized the character. It would have given him more to do. And so, like I said before, I can't really blame Elba's joyless performance. But there was one character performance that wasn't joyless, at least for the actor. Matthew McConaughey's Man in Black is actually a big player in the Kingiverse. He's in a lot of stories. He's emissary to the biggest bad, the Crimson King, who actually has spawned other littler evils in other King novels. Supposedly, the Crimson King is even the father of Pennywise from It. So you understand how these evil characters are pretty crucial to this entire universe. But at the very least, you could tell that McConaughey, unlike Elba, was doing the best he could with what he was given, because like Elba, he wasn't given that much to do. He was like a slick version of the Wicked Witch of the West, but without the flavor. But like I said, you could tell that McConaughey was having fun with the role. Maybe a little too much fun, because at moments it was a little over the top, a little corny. And I started thinking, was this his idea? Matthew, you wanted to talk about the climax of the film? Yeah, Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe when he shoots at me, that I can like throw my hands up in the air and deflect the bullets with little shards of glass that I control with my mind. How would glass stop bullets? No, man. It's just a metaphor for what the world is. We're all just cobwebs. We catch delicious morsels in an everlasting silky web. But earlier in the film, we actually saw you catch a bullet and you didn't even see it coming. I mean, couldn't you just keep doing that? Cobwebs. All right. Well, what more can I say about this film except it was pretty much just all a waste. Even Whedon alum Fran Kranz was in it. I love him, but he was just in it. Abby Lee plays Tirana, who in the series of novels pretty much does nothing, and well, they got that part right in the film. There were also a ton of Stephen King Easter eggs from The Shining, The Majestic, Cujo, Christine, It. It would have been a lot of fun to watch if it went anywhere. If this were the pilot to a TV series, I would absolutely watch, because you know that they have more time to deal with things. They could flesh out the characters, they could fill in the gaps in the story, tell you more about the history of this universe. Instead, as its own standalone feature film, it's a burn it. Poll question, what's your favorite bad Stephen King film? As always, leave your answers in the comments section below. But until next time, school's out. Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.